In Room D of our Architect Gallery tour, we will be exploring Gustav Albin Pearson's work from birth at 1880, died 1955. Originally, Albin worked as a draftsman for Kirtland Cutter's firm, Cutter and Malgren, beginning in 1913. He established his own architecture business in 1917. Soon after the prolific building period in the 1920s, that included his terracotta-adorned Art Deco design work for the Chronicle Building and Paulson Medical Building in Spokane, Washington, the Great Depression hit, and the staff at Pearson's firm fell from 29 people to 2. Gustav later found work designing the new community of Richland Village in Richland, Washington, Tri-Cities, where an agricultural town had been located. He designed government housing, schools, and other buildings developed to serve the Hanford nuclear site. Washington State University has a collection of documents about his work. Gustav was hired by the DuPont, a Spokane-based architect company, which then Gustav planned and oversaw the development of an entire community consisting of hundreds of single and multifamily dwellings. These edifices, together with 3 prefabricated houses plans, not designed by Pehrson, were up to date in their materials, manufacturing, and speed of construction. But most were designed with a vague nod to tradition, drawing upon the Dutch colonial or colonial revival prototypes. The neighborhood plans, too, drew elements from the recent past. New Deal community planning was evident in the parks, schools, and commercial structures, as well as different housing types for mixed-income families. As a different letter of the alphabet was used to demarcate the different stock plans for each of the houses, the dwellings earned the moniker alphabet houses or letter houses. Pearson's plans reflected the desire of DuPont for quality and conservative housing for its employees, and the thrifty approach required by the Manhattan Project. In this way, Pearson's designs drew from the allegedly democratic attitudes of earlier New Deal community planning, where resettlement efforts for disenfranchised urban and rural residents resulted in the planned communities, with a centralized commercial core and residencies based around the single industry. Yet many of these resettlement projects failed to create cohesive communities as residents struggled under an imposed bureaucracy and insufficient funding. Aiding the planning of Hanford was the military presence, war material, and funding priority of the Manhattan Project, as well as the shared belief amongst the high-level government officials that the project was necessary to win the war. Neighborhoods surrounded a central commercial and entertainment core, and schools, stores, parks, and churches were located within walking distance of one another. Streets were contoured to the low hills and laid out in a convolular pattern. Existing shade trees were preserved, and houses were angled to the street to provide privacy and to permit crosswinds in the hot summers. The neighborhoods were also provided with car compounds, communal parking for each street rather than individual driveways. Although many homeowners over time incorporated driveways and garages in their building lots, all lots were provided with the space for yards, for Pearson believed that each family needed private space to recreate. He also believed the yards needed to be small enough for a working family to maintain. Overall, Pearson provided 22 floor plans for the alphabet houses, each plan named with a different letter, each letter with the additional configurations such as Q1, Q2, and each built with the same materials and construction methods. 8 of these designs were constructed during wartime, and 12 were added after the war. Housing types ranged from single-story, 2-bedroom ranch houses, 2 to 4-bedroom, 2-story houses. Higher quality materials were used regardless of the intended occupant. Frames of Douglas fir, harvested from the 1933 Tillamook burn in Oregon, were placed on the concrete foundations, while basements' double-hung windows and hardwood floors were standard. On-site mills, shops, and concrete plants allowed for speedy, low-cost, and uniform construction. Most of the houses were designed to resemble the Dutch and colonial revival, but they were minimally embellished. Construction of the alphabet houses began late in April 1943, with the first unit completed 3 months later. Given wartime demands and the increasing need for engineers and management, construction proceeded quickly under the intense pressure until early 1945. Construction was not fast enough to satisfy the Manhattan Project planners, however, and they soon shipped in 1,800 partially furnished 1, 2, and 3-bedroom prefabricated housing units to supplement the overall project. These units, installed on the wood piers and intended for blue-collar or junior employees, were built by the Prefabrication Engineering Corporation of Portland, Oregon, and based on similar wartime housing design produced by the Tennessee Valley Authority in Knoxville, Tennessee. The prefabricated houses were erected initially with flat roofs and were susceptible to severe damage in heavy winds, so they later replaced the gable roofs. Pehrson contended that these prefabricated units, designed U and V, lacked traditional form or architectural character, and he considered their placement problematic. They were built in repetitious, grid-like pattern in the western section of the village, away from the river. The prefabricated houses also created class distinctions amongst residents due to their largely blue-collar occupants and their segregation away from other neighborhoods. Yet Pehrson was nonetheless compelled to incorporate the prefabricated units into his overall plans. The federal government owned all of the houses, and residents could not make additions or changes without government approval. This arrangement remained effective in the immediate post-war years. Although the government transferred management to the Atomic Energy Commission, Pehrson remained on the government payroll until 1951, eventually overseeing the planning and construction of the city of 20,000 residents. In the late 1950s, the government began moving towards the privatization of Richland, Washington. It relinquished ownership and began offering the houses at a reasonable rate, providing current residents the right to first refusal before putting them on the housing market. Few houses today remain their original condition, but the historic character of Richland's neighborhoods remain rooted in the wartime planned community.